Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the banquet hall here at Jamaica House. It's a beautiful Friday morning with very beautiful people in our midst. And here at the office of the Prime Minister, we aim to be on time or close to time as possible. I see Audrey Togwell Henry in the crowd or in the auspicious audience and others. May I ask you to take your seats? The Prime Minister will be here momentarily. And we will begin. But I know that when bankers come together, it's a lot of talking, so you have to hurry up and get them together real quickly. Courtney Campbell, good morning to you. Long time I said no phone, COVID has kept us away for a little while. Very good. Miriam, good morning to you. Chauvel, good morning. Wow, from another life. Blast from the past. Mr. Jarrett, good morning. And Keith, Rockstar Keith, good morning. All right. So... And all right. Don't get too pink, Keith. I'm sorry. All right. So my job is to ensure that we are quick about this because this, though very important, is a ceremonial event that takes you away from the business of your business. So we won't be very long, but the Prime Minister is on his way. So I just thought I'd get everyone settled until he comes. So you can, while you're seated, just have your conversations until we're formally ready to begin. Sorry, go on. All right. So the next time you hear me, we'll begin the formal proceedings. Thank you.
so much time till I don't know quite how to start. All I know is that from that day until this, you remain on my mind and in my heart. You know, it was never really clear just what went wrong. I guess that's why I had to write this song. If I knew then what I know now, I would have never let you go. No way, no how. Oh, it hurts, remembering how things used to be. We thought our love would last throughout eternity. Now it's history. Oh, baby, oh, it should have been me. Should have been me. Should have been me. It would have been all those things in life. All the things that was meant to be. Oh, baby, I know, I know, I know, I
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please stand for the arrival of Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness. Good morning, you may be seated, and welcome once again to the banquet hall here at Jamaica House for a very, very significant signing ceremony this morning. This morning, we'll be witnessing the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding with deposit-taking institutions for the National Identification System of the Pilot Identity Verification and Authentication Services. With us this morning, Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, the Honorable Floyd Green, a Member of Parliament and Minister without portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister, and as some people call him, the Minister of Digital Transformation. We also have Mrs. Audrey Sewell, the Permanent Secretary here at the Office of the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. Mr. Benjamin Rosedeth, the Monetization and State Specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank in Kingston. Dr. Warren Vernon, the Program Director at the National Identification System, and all of the team members at NIDS who've been doing a fantastic job. Mr. Septimus Blake, the President of the Jamaica Bankers Association and the Chief Executive Officer of the National Commercial Bank. And may I just take some privilege? We have, so that we don't lengthen our salutations, saying other members of the deposit-taking financial institution, but because it is so significant and because all of you today are real disruptors in the whole move to drive Jamaica's technology, let me recognize you by name. The Honorable Earl Jarrett of the Jamaica National Group. He's the Group Chief Executive Officer and Deputy Chairman. We have Mrs. Audrey Tugwell Henry, President and Chief Executive Officer of Scotiabank. Mr. Septimus Blake, who I picked up a while ago, and he has his whole entire social media team here as well. Thank you, Mr. Blake, because you're putting this right out there so all the young people can see, and all, certainly your deposit membership can also see what you're doing here today. Mrs. Chauvel Johnson Cunningham. Mrs. Chauvel Johnson Cunningham. Sometimes I don't use the Cunningham, right, Chauvel? I'm so sorry. Chief Executive Officer at Sagicor Bank. Ms. Eva Lewis, the Director of Citibank, the Country Officer at Citibank. Mrs. Miriam McIntosh Robinson, the President and Chief Executive Officer of First Global Bank. Mr. Owen Francis, no relation, but Owen, where are you? We're going to have to talk about whether or not we're related, right? The Director of Retail Banking Channels at First Caribbean International Bank. Mr. Weldon Madden, the Acting Chief Executive Officer at Cornerstone Trust Merchant Bank Limited. Mr. Courtney Campbell, the President and Chief Executive Officer at Victoria Mutual Building Society. And of course, it's the Victoria Mutual Group. Very nice change in logo, Courtney. I really like that. And of course, I call him the rock star. He's been doing fantastic in terms of communicating just how our growth indicators affect the Jamaican people. Mr. Keith Duncan, the Group Chief Executive Officer of the Jamaica Money Market Limited, here with us today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We always... Oh, Jerome, how could I ever do that? My apologies. Jerome, thank you so much for being with us here as well for this significant signing ceremony. Jerome Smalling, the Chief Executive Officer of the JMB Group as well. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not keeping you long. You know how some people can just get in the way and talk and talk. We're not doing that because you all are, though this is a ceremony, I don't want to keep you from the business you do, which is ensuring that there is some amount of profitability and driving certainly the Jamaican economy. So before we start, we always do our formalities. May I ask you to stand for the playing of the national anthem of Jamaica. when you truly think about it, this is the greatest national anthem anywhere in the world. May I ask you to remain standing? Mr. Richard Della Penna, the Public Relations Manager at NIDS, will offer the opening prayer.
Good morning, everyone. Let us pray. Gracious Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this wonderful event. We thank you for all the participants who are here today. We ask that as we start this program that you will be in our midst today. Be with the moderator, be with those who are streaming online, be with those who are watching, be with the technology, be with those who are going to be participating. Be with the Prime Minister who will be giving the main address today. Be with all those who will be participating at the head table. And when at last thou shalt come, save us for Christ's sake, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. I think Richard is actively pursuing membership in the leadership of the church. This is a few times now he's done the opening prayer, and he gets better and better every time. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me start off by ensuring that you all do some practice. Good morning, everybody. No, when the Prime Minister comes, he's going to say the same thing, and you have to go on like you have some energy, right? So let's do another practice session before he comes up to speak. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Sounding a little better, all right. Good, a little bit of practice. And so, ladies and gentlemen, to bring you greetings and tell you a little bit more about the partnership that we've forged with the Inter-American Development Bank, please help me welcome Mr. Benjamin Roseth, the Modernization of State Specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Honorable Prime Minister, Minister Green, P.S. Wool, distinguished guests and members of the media, good morning. Now, if today were just another day to talk about the NIDS, I would probably tell you that digital transformation is a key tool to promote social and economic development. I would probably tell you that a secure, unique, and national ID is a key for digital transformation. And I would show you that from Estonia to Uruguay, there is no successful case of digital transformation without this unique, secure, and national ID. And I would probably conclude by saying I'm very happy because the government of Jamaica, the people of Jamaica, with the support of the IDB, are just a few months away from this secure, unique, and national ID being a reality. But today is not just another day to talk about the NIDS. And I want to tell you why by stealing a quote from Minister Green. Minister Green often says that Jamaicans are utterly practical people. And though I've just been here 5 months, I know what he says to be true. So how does that impact the NIDS? It means that unless the NIDS can make Jamaicans' lives better, it's not worth its weight in plastic. The MOU that's going to be signed here today will pave the way for the NIDS card to be the primary document used to open a bank account. And I opened a bank account in one of your institutions a few months ago, so I saw with my own eyes all the papers and all the requirements that are necessary to open that account. And when I was there, I asked myself, now, how many people are out there that would like to have a bank account, that would benefit from having a bank account, but don't have one? They don't have one because they can't produce all of these documents. Maybe they don't have a passport, a driver's license, electoral ID card, or what have you. And then I said, what if all these people had a bank account? Maybe the size of the formal sector would be bigger. Maybe household investment in health and education would be higher. Maybe there would be greater savings for retirement. Maybe there would be less robbery. But all of these dreams start with the NIDS. And that's why today is special. Today marks a huge step forward in making the NIDS useful. And that's why, from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of the IDB, I want to thank all of you representing the banks of Jamaica for taking leadership, for making this huge step forward to making the NIDS useful. So congratulations to the team, to the government of Jamaica, and all the financial institutions represented here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rosette, for your remarks. Ensuring that, I think, the key word really is efficiency. You know, at present, the system is really not that very efficient, if we are really to be honest. When you go to the banks or any other institution and the mounds of paper you have to go through, the hoops you have to jump through to get JP and all kind of people to sign. And even if you know the bank manager, they're going to tell you that, boy, we can't do it this way because we are obligated to ensure that we go through a process called Know Your Customer. And so that it's going to be at a central repository for all of the bankers to ensure that they can verify and authenticate the identity is absolutely brilliant and important for the transformation of Jamaica. And a man who is a key partner in all of this, who represents certainly all our partners here today, Mr. Septimus Blake, the president of the Jamaica Bankers Association. Mr. Blake, if you could come.
The Most Honorable Andrew Michael Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, Honorable Floyd Green, Minister without Portfolio, Office of the Prime Minister, Mrs. Audrey Sewell, Permanent Secretary, Office of the Prime Minister, Mrs. Naomi Francis, Press Secretary, Office of the Prime Minister and Moderator, Dr. Warren Vernon, Program Director, NIDS, Mr. Benjamin Roseth, Modernization of State Specialist for the Inter-American Development Bank, fellow heads of banks, members of the executive of the Jamaica Bankers Association, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. I'm honored today to bring greetings on behalf of the Jamaica Bankers Association and to participate in the MOU signing for the National Identification Systems pilot with deposit-taking institution. This signing represents a key milestone in Jamaica's transformation journey. A verifiable identity is a core capability for any modern economy and a critical enabler of the digital transformation. A unique, reliable, secure structure to capture, store, authenticate personal identity creates a strong foundation for greater productivity, participation, and protection. In respect of productivity, according to a recent study from the McKinsey Global Institute, countries that implement a digital ID scheme can boost their gross domestic product by 3 to 13% by 2030. So we see productivity as a composite of time and money. The absence of a unique identifier costs citizens and financial institutions time and money. It takes too much time for citizens to establish identity if we consider the need to visit a JP or to provide references, and in some cases, multiple pieces of documentation. There's also an associated financial cost, the taxi fare, the bus fare, or gas money from multiple trips and time taken off from productive work. The ability to authenticate on demand without physical presence also lays a foundation for greater speed and efficiency in the delivery of services provided by the financial sector and the government of Jamaica. The time and money saved will have a positive impact on productivity and translates to growth. In terms of participation and inclusion, the ultimate resource in economic development is people. So it is people, not capital or raw materials, that develop an economy. Peter Drucker said those words many, many years ago. So digital identification lowers the barriers to participation in the financial system, and participation is another key area to be unlocked to facilitate growth. Many IDs are essential qualification for other things. So the driver's license qualifies us to drive, the passport enables us to travel, or voter's ID allows us to vote. The beauty of a digital ID available to all citizens, all Jamaican citizens, even newborns, just on the basis of you being a citizen, is the most far-reaching construct for participation and inclusion. As Honorable Minister Floyd Green would have shared in the recent unveiling of the National ID, an optional symbol to identify persons with disabilities is also an important feature of the card and further reinforces the theme of participation and inclusion. In terms of protection, one of the primary fears associated with the National Digital ID is around data breaches of confidential information. This is a rational fear, and will augur well to ensure institutions put the appropriate mechanism in place to ensure that customer data is kept secure. However, I'm confident that there is more protection in the context of digital identification backed by biometric compared to what we have today, where our information sits on paper in offices all over the country. We have seen in Estonia, where citizens benefit from the transparency, as governments can show each citizen what data is on file for them, where it is stored, and log all digital interactions and queries on the data. Unauthorized access to citizen data is visible, and breaches are subject to penalties. This information on who is querying their personal information is available to every citizen. Unlike if your documents are laying down in a physical file in a government or doctor's office, it also puts citizens in a position to control who can or cannot see their information. Protection from identity theft and fraud at the citizen level, and greater ability to detect money laundering activities, all bode well for greater citizen participation. So I'm here today in the capacity of President of the Jamaica Bankers Association and Chief Executive Officer of National Commercial Bank, Jamaica Limited, and we fully endorse and welcome this initiative because of the expected benefits for banking customers and financial institutions. But beyond that, as a Jamaican citizen, I'm equally excited about the positive benefits that will unfold for our country and my fellow citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. You touched on two very important aspects, very practical as well, especially for those who live in rural Jamaica, who tend not to necessarily want to move with the technology as quickly. Of course, some people in the town areas do that. But can you imagine sometimes you go in a doctor's office or in you could probably be even just innocently passing another person's desk and you see somebody's information. That is problematic, and I don't think people fully understand and realize the kinds of problems, as opposed to having it digital where you can know who is looking at your data. So this augurs well all around. I'm here to tell you too, Mr. Blake, that you have at least 3 JPs, including myself, in the room. And the permanent secretary. So, this part of the work of service of the JP, let's see what the future holds. But we're happy, though, that this becomes a reality. So thank you once again, Mr. Blake, for signaling your commitment and certainly your partnership in this matter. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Minister with the energy to drive the digital transformation, along with the Prime Minister, the Honourable Floyd Green, who did a brilliant presentation in Parliament in his sectoral debate presentation, is here now to give some more perspective and offer remarks. Please make him welcome.
Thank you very much, Naomi, our Press Secretary. Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, our Permanent Secretary, Ms. Audrey Sewell, Benjamin Rosette, our partner from the IDB, President of the Jamaica Bankers Association, Mr. Septimus Blake, other specially invited guests, friends, those joining us online. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. The
Prime Minister has charged us as members of the cabinet and of the government to work to solve some of Jamaica's fundamental issues. One of those fundamental issues, quite frankly, is access to financial services. You know, Capri did a study, Ben, called Check-In, Increasing Access to Formal Financial Services, and estimated that over 17%, 500,000 Jamaicans are unbanked. So we do have a fair idea of the size of the problem. So when I say I'm very excited about today, and I'm very excited to see all our major financial institutions here with us, Mr. Blake, today is a very, very good day. And that's because we are taking a fundamental step towards increasing access to our deposit-taking institutions. Clearly, the ability to identify consumers has been a challenge for our banks. It has been a very costly matter for our banks. And quite frankly, it has also been a very frustrating matter for our citizens. So on each side, on the side of the banks or financial institutions, and on the side of the citizens, we both have identified that this is a problem that we must fix. And the core of fixing that problem is developing a holistic, trusted database for identity verification. And I really want us to give the National Identification System project team a big, big round of applause. Dr. Vernon and that team have really stuck to the task along with our partners to ensure that we are almost there. So you would have heard we're about 97% towards the completion of our card production center. We've already interviewed and have people ready to be employed. We're about 90% towards the build-out of our software that will provide the back-end services for our national identification system. We expect to finish our first enrollment center in Kingston in August, and we expect to have another 4 in another couple months after that as we will embark on our pilot in Kingston and St. Andrew. But again, I think Ben was right. If the card has no use, it really has no value. So all the work that we are doing to ensure that we have the most secure identification, verification services in the region will amount to nothing unless our citizens see the use. So on the government side, we are removing all the barriers. The national identification system, your card, will be free. We will be moving to set up enrollment centers in every single parish. We're partnering with the post office to utilize their build-out. And we've already identified 24 post offices that we will be utilizing, modernizing, so that citizens can have easy access. We're taking it a step further because we appreciate that some of the challenges start even before they get their ID, because we do still have citizens who do not have birth certificates. So we announced last week, under the direction of the Prime Minister, a new project called Operation Birthright, where in the 60th year we're putting $50 million to ensure that at least 11,000 Jamaicans who are unable to afford their birth certificate get it free of cost. So the government is taking all reasonable steps to ensure that our people will have access to this system. So we expect that our partners will take all reasonable steps to make it easy now for people to open bank accounts. When Naomi spoke about rural people, as I close, I thought she was going to say, we really don't like coming to Kingston. We really would much rather to be able to open our bank accounts in the comforts of our home, somewhere in St. Elizabeth, no bias, like Treasure Beach. Now that the government is moving in this direction, we need the banks to move with us. And this MOU is just the first step, because what we want to do is when we issue the very first card, the person can ideally have a simplified process to open a bank account almost instantaneously. That is the challenge, and that is where we're going. We've decided to showcase the card today, so when you have some time, you can actually look at the proofs of the card. The project team has made that available. We did display a big version in Parliament, so much more beautiful when you see the small version of the card. So we look forward to this as an important first step, but let us get the work done. And we've put out some time frames. So I'm saying to my banking partners, when Prime Minister gets his card and other people get their card when we issue that first batch, let them be able to open that new bank account immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. You've said it so very well, and I hope that given what you've outlined, that we have almost a bevy of people now rushing to be the first to get the cards, especially when we're making it so accessible to ensure that they do. Thank you so much once again, Minister. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you our keynote speaker. You know, when he came into government, there was a vision to improve Jamaica. And all I would say is every now and again when I think about the body of work and the body of achievement that the Prime Minister has accomplished, I call him quietly the Minister of Productivity and Efficiency. He has the uncomfortable discussions with Jamaicans sometimes when he gets to the podium. He'll say, you know, I have to tell you the truth. This matter of productivity, this card will help to solve. The matter of efficiency to help growth and development, this project will help to solve. We now need to put in our own work as citizens of Jamaica, as partners in the process of building a new Jamaica, especially in our 60th year, that we get the job done and we see Jamaica moving from strength to strength and certainly from developing to developed world status. And the man who has that vision, who is transforming Jamaica, the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness.
Master of Ceremonies. We are now a few more steps in our long journey towards the establishment of a seamless, integrous, and effective system of national identification. We started off a few years ago believing that we had universal political support in Parliament for the establishment of the national identification system. It turned out not to be the case. We ended up being referred to our courts who made certain pronouncements, which we, as a democracy and as we are obliged to do, we have fulfilled the various pronouncements of the courts on our national identification system. I believe our national identification system is stronger because it does account for all the differing and varying perspectives as to how the government should go about securing this very important objective of ensuring that, one, we have a system of a national civil registry that is a registry of the important statistical data for all our citizens and persons who live in our border and are subject to our jurisdiction. That civil registry is capable of documenting the life events of our citizens as a store for their own benefit, for future generations, for history and reference, but also as a means of supporting the ease of transactions. And that is where I want to focus my presentation to you this morning, because I am dealing with bankers. And bankers and the banking system, by its very nature, not just to mention by law, must establish a record of transaction. And the record of transaction, it's not just a mere ledger that you keep and the accounting standards and systems that you follow. But it is also a ledger of trust, because each transaction is based on trust. And the first element of trust in a transaction is that you know who you're transacting with. In Jamaica, we go to the shopper, we say, "Trust me." We take it for granted when we say it. In other words, we use trust as the substitute word for credit. And that credit takes place because the shopkeeper, in essence, is a community person, and he knows who is saying, "Trust me." And because there is this local knowledge, credit is offered. So in Jamaica, we understand trust as credit from a financial perspective. But if you were to take that understanding of trust and go to the bank and say, "Trust me on account," no? Bank would have to say, "Well, I have to know my customer." So here what, before I can give you any trust, come to me with identification. Now, the challenge with the identification in Jamaica is that you have several that could pass as identification, but it doesn't satisfy the banking standard or several other entities' standard, and therefore the banks sometimes have to go behind the identification that is presented, because there is no identification system in Jamaica that is absolutely foolproof, except maybe for our passports and our voter ID, which would have a fairly high level of security. Even with passports, we have seen fraud committed. We haven't really documented any significant cases of voter ID fraud. The challenge with those is that they are not universal. People who travel or have to travel, they usually get passports, and they go through a very rigorous process of getting their passports. But the national voter ID, voting is not obligatory. And people have been trying to get their voter IDs to use it as a means of national identification. But at some point in time, the verification of the ID, of the person's identity, has to be done. It doesn't always happen in a systematic and routine way. And so the banks are usually saying, and other entities that need this trust are usually saying, "Listen, come to me with 2 forms. And better than that, to take your JP letter with you sometimes." And then the banks will say, "Well, if you don't have it, then maybe we'll have to go with a kind of lower level account that restricts your operations until we establish your series of transactions which can give us an idea as to who you are and the trust that we can give you." And that takes up a lot of time in the banking system in order to bring you in formally into the system. Now that inefficiency is, time and money lost. It is a high level of frustration to the average citizen. But you know what it is also doing to our young people? It is creating a sense in them that, Jamaica, it's so hard to live here, it's so hard to do business here, everything is so, laborious to get done. There's a high level of frustration, particularly in our university graduates, about our systems, and their perspective is that, they can't survive in Jamaica. It's not so much about the pay, and pay is part of it, but it's just the systems that don't work. But there's so many things that you have to change about these systems, including the political issues, because there are some people in the country who are influential, who are opinion leaders, but who are wedded to an outdated way of thinking. It was their way of thinking that created the problems in the first place, and we can't rely or allow their ways of thinking to color and shut our options for the future. And my job has been to challenge them and to bring a different perspective to the fore and to be strong in pushing through these perspectives to ensure that Jamaica becomes an efficient place where the next generation of Jamaicans can feel very proud of their country and the systems that are in place, instead of feeling very disenchanted with what is happening here. Jamaica is modernizing. Some people don't like it. They like it the way it is. And not for, political reasons only. Some people are just wedded to the physical representation of a bank. Recently, I was in a conversation with someone who was just complaining bitterly that one of their banks on Septimus on Oxford Road that they religiously went to, that they know everybody there, that somehow the branch is closing. And for them it is a disruption in how they have done business. And it's as if the banks don't care about them anymore. It's a very strong feeling in the society. The technological transformation, you use the term disruption in a positive way, that we are disrupting the old way of banking, and it is good. But there are persons who are not yet, convinced that this new way of virtualizing everything can be trusted or is in their benefit. Because, we have grown up in a culture where if we can't touch the cash, it's not wealth or money, it's not there. So there are people who are still of the view that they must go to the bank and ask the teller, what is my bank balance? And when you present them with a card and say, go to the ATM, it is so informal. It is, for many, it's a challenge, not just for literacy and being able to interface with machines, but the nature of our society, is that, our finance and our business is always very personal, and that personal touch is required. Not to mention the issue of banking fees. But I won't go into that. I said I won't mention it. You know what my position is already. We're talking about NIDS today. But NIDS, the National Identification System, is designed to increase the level of trust so that more transactions can take place. And you know when an economy is booming, when it is growing, you can just measure transactions, just the number of transactions that are taking place. And the banks will know, because they will see not just more accounts being opened, because you have a lot of accounts, but you will see the accounts being used. And that is the intention. So what we're trying to do as a government, one is to create this system, make it very strong and robust and integrous, ensure that there is enough redundancy in it that it can stand up to intense usage. So behind what we are presenting here as the system of registering and giving you a card and you can use that card, there's a whole heap of technology behind the scenes to ensure that it is secure, that the uptime on the servers are 99.9%, that you can get in contact with the servers to verify identity, that information can be exchanged securely. All of that is happening in the background. The public may not be aware of it. But the government is also doing something else in parallel because it's, the value of the card is not just the ability to physically present it, to say, here is my picture ID. But we have to have a very robust and widely dispersed broadband internet connectivity in Jamaica. And I see my friend Keith nodding because he's an integral part of the National Broadband Project that is ongoing. So all of these things work in parallel. So you will hear me say we're going to create Jamaica into a digital society. There are many elements to it, as I am saying. So there is the NIDS part to it, which is to give every citizen a certified identity that is unique and that is secure and that is private. That identity can be used to conduct transactions in a virtual format, meaning that you don't have to physically present yourself to establish trust. That yes, you can go to the bank and show your ID, but you will also be able to use the ID on virtual platforms and verify by sending various, Dr. Vernon will tell you the technical terms, what's it called, sending the keys digitally. And that exchange will verify identity. But more and more, there is another element that we have to undertake, and that is the public education. And I believe that the banks have a duty as well to undertake that public education. I've seen attempts at it, but I think there needs to be much more done to reassure the public that the transformation that is happening in the banking system to greater utilization of fintech and consolidation of operations and the virtualization of services and so forth, it's not an attempt to get rid of, costly business, because that is operating in the minds of some people. But rather, it is an attempt to be more efficient in the provision of services. And you may very well have to find ways of assisting those who are finding it difficult to make the transition. That is in your interest, because once there is the full public buy-in, I think you would reach an inflection point where the take-up and utilization of the digital services would be higher. Already, you do have a very high take-up of digital services, but I think much more can be done on your part. And I would say this: providing the services digitally reduces the cost of operations to the banks. It doesn't always necessarily translate, but it should. That it should reduce the cost of banking to the citizen. And that is why I support it. I've said it in that way to say to the banks, ensure that the promise of digitization does result in a reduced banking cost to the average citizen. We are doing our part with providing the NIDS to reduce your cost of verification of identity. Give some reflection of that to our banking customers, to our citizens. The last point I want to make about the NIDS. One of our famous professors was passed on. I was with him attended a conference with him, Professor Rex Neckleford, and he was telling me about the concept of somatization. That is to, making people feel that they are someone important, that they have an identity. And that is a very important part of the Jamaican culture. You know, one of our greetings would be respect. Just a greeting. The upfront acknowledgement that you are someone of importance. And that's what this process is of identification. It's the smadification of the country. More and more people are recognizing that you can't just exist in the country unknown, anonymous. That existence should be recorded somewhere. It should be known to the state. It is your right to have an identity and to have that identity be unique and protected and safe. No one else should be able to claim your identity. And that identity should give you access to public services and public spaces. And that identity should be, once it is established by the state, it should be respected and should not be looked behind. And so, within the NIDS, we have put in a clause that once someone comes to your bank with the NIDS card, that's the only card you can ask for. I'm being very blunt with the clause because that is what the law says. So once the person comes to you with their NIDS card, that's all you need for the verification of the identity. Now, so there is not this indirect questioning of who you are, saying, hey, bring 2 cards plus the JP plus a reference of another bank account holder to establish who you are. That's who you are. Yes, I hope I'm moving people to that position. So that's an important part of the NIDS. Now, you know, we're having a debate, and again, I'm with bankers, so let me take the opportunity to raise this issue. I'm with bankers, but there's a national debate happening on how the government should respond to crises that are affecting the ability of the country in general, but you know, poor households, low-income households in general, to survive these crises. How should government respond, say, for example, if there is a hurricane, to give a transfer of resources to persons who have been affected? How should the government respond to give a transfer of resources if oil prices increase and the price of fuel increase, or if food prices increase? How should the government respond? There's one school of thought which says, hey, the government should give a tax relief. In other words, the argument is that, you know, prices have gone up, governments are collecting taxes based upon prices. What the government should do then is cut its tax, right, which would then should result in a reduction in prices to consumers. So that's one. Or, you know, well, that's a general thing, to just, you know, whatever take of prices that governments have because of taxes, the government should just cut that, and the society will get the benefit. Now, you know, it is not an unreasonable position. It's not an unreasonable position. However, if you are in a society where there is great inequality, mere cutting of the taxes only exacerbates the inequality, because you will not be able to be discriminatory in who gets it. And I'm using discriminatory now in the positive sense, meaning you would be able to say, the people who really need it should be the people who get it. Right? So we, as Jamaicans, we have an incredible sense of equity to the point where some of its applications would be just ridiculous. Right? So we are saying, yeah, everybody should get the benefit. But not everybody needs the benefit. And if everybody gets the benefit, then those people who really need the benefit is not going to get the full benefit that they should get. So what you would be doing over time is to increase inequality. It's the same principle that has affected us in how we have funded tertiary education for a long time. And I heard Dr. King, Professor King at University of the West Indies and Capri make the similar analogy. In a society like ours, where there is inequality, government has to be targeted in how it makes intervention in support of crises. In the United Kingdom, recently, two things happened. You would have seen where they have come out with I believe it's a tax package in addition to a support package, where they're giving significant support to poor households. But at the same time, they have rebalanced by placing, I believe, a one-off tax on companies that are making super profits. I'm giving my paraphrasing of my understanding of what has happened. So, you know, it might be the case in the UK that this could work, or in Australia, or in other countries, because the level of inequality is not that high. But in Jamaica, we have to be so careful about how government tweaks and changes tax policy and the impact on equity and inequality in the country. But it doesn't mean that government shouldn't respond. For countries where the inequality is so high, you must establish a robust beneficiary identification system. And we have started that true path, but it is not as robust as it could be, because even with path, there are still issues of identification and how the payment is made. What we're trying to do, and what we have tried to go on to great lengths to explain, and usually it gets obfuscated in how it is reported and lost in the politics. What we're trying to do is to build a system starting with our civil registration so that we capture every single Jamaican. We properly document them. We establish their identity. It reduces the transaction time and cost and increases trust. And then build on top of that a system of properly identifying persons who would be in need of government support during a time of crisis. And then to layer on top of that a system of transfer that would make it easy to move the resources from government to persons who need it. You know, in Kenya, the M-Pesa system is viewed as so efficient in moving resources from families who work in urban areas to send it back to their remote villages, to mothers, and it's internal remittance basically. And the M-Pesa system is a digital system that in rural areas, people with access to telephone are able to get that cash transfer digitally. So I'm hoping I'm communicating the system to you, that this grand idea that we have said we're going to transform Jamaica into a digital society, it's a complex system, but it is not complicated. It is multifaceted, but it is easily navigable by everyone. It is going to be far more efficient, but far more equitable. That's the idea behind it. It will help us to reduce the inequality and the gaps in the society. Now, can you imagine if we were 5 years in advance of this system, that we did this 10 years ago or 3 years ago, and everybody now has their NIDS ID. and we are able to truly identify the children who need it for part, the households that really need it. When the pandemic hit, we had over, let me tell you, we transferred money to people. Over $300 million was uncollected, just because people were not able to verify their identification. They had wrong TRN number, wrong bank account number, wrong this number. 300 million. So even today, there are people still trying to resolve their identity in order to collect the funds. Even with the SET program, which was for employed persons who would have had some establishment of identity, several thousands of them weren't able to collect because wrong TRN number, wrong this number, wrong that number. So what we're trying to do is to sort all of that out by establishing the needs. Now, once we have the needs, as I've said, and we lay on top of that a proper beneficiary identification system, and then layer on top of that a system of digital transfer of resources, as we have started with our central bank digital currency, which we have now made legal tender by changing the law recently. Minister Clark has done that. The government will now be able to make all its transfers through that system. So no more need now. It always hurts my heart when I'm going to my constituency and see my elderly constituents lining up at the post office or other centers to collect their path check. You know how many people have a business in changing path check and collecting something off the top? You know how much of path doesn't reach to the path beneficiary? And that's what we're trying to do. So for those people whose vested interest is never to see this happen, please give it a chance. Stop spreading the false rumors and confusing our Jamaican people and keeping us behind. It's the most frustrating thing. You go on social media and you see some of the nonsense that is being circulated and people following it. And you wonder, where are these people? They realize what they're doing and how they're destroying the country. So, we are convinced that we need to keep doing this, and we are moving ahead. But it's important that the banking sector, an important partner in this, ensures that it is used fully, that the ID is respected, and that the benefits are passed on to the consumers. Because that is how we will convince the Jamaican people of the value of what we're doing. So, just to wrap up this point about how are we going to respond to the crisis, this is part of it. This is important in establishing a seamless, robust, integrous, and efficient national identification system. We're moving ahead in parallel with the system of digital transfer through the central bank, the digital central bank currency, so that eventually all our payments, all our social support payments, our path payments and so forth, and eventually salaries from public sectors will be going through our digital system. And we will be a force pushing that through. And we are hoping that the banks, as much as possible and as far as possible, will also encourage their customers to move onto the digital platform. Listen, we are living in a time of great change. It's a revolutionary time. The modern banking system is over 500 years old. And we are living in a time when the modern banking system is changing again. We are living in a time when we are witnessing the change from the combustion engine to the electric engine. We are living in a time when we are witnessing the cyber-physical, the emergence of the cyber world, the virtual world, right? Being paired with machines to deliver service. We are living in that time. Generations before had no clue. You know, you used to watch Star Trek and say, ah, look at that, fanciful. We're heading there. Now is not the time for Jamaica to be Luddites. Right? The people who throw their boots into the printing press. Now is the time for us to embrace technology, embrace science, and don't view it with suspicion and superstition. Let us not lose out again as we have lost at the several points of the transition of society. You know, we weren't able to control our destiny during the Industrial Revolution. We weren't able to control our destiny when we had the information revolution. Now we are firmly in control of our destiny in the fourth Industrial Revolution. And we must make the most of it. And creating the digital society is so important in building the new Jamaica. With those many comments and exhortations, I thank you.
Minister, thank you so much for those very, very important and critical words. I can hear the man in St. Elizabeth and in your own constituency saying, "Boss, you hit the nail upon the head." And I can hear the church sister saying, "Amen, amen." So thank you so much, Prime Minister, for guiding, certainly, the discussion and certainly ensuring that we see the vision in terms of the Jamaica we want to create in the future. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I did promise that this is not going to be very long. We're about an hour into our ceremony, so let us now get to the conclusion of it with the actual signing of the Memorandum of Understanding. Firstly, let us then have the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, along with the Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Audrey Sewell, the Minister without Portfolio, the Honorable Floyd Green, and the President of the Jamaica Bankers Association doing the signing. And then I will call on All right. This takes us far into the future. All right, so we've had Mr. Jarrett, Mr. Smalling do the signing. Now, Mrs. Henry and Mr. Campbell. Then now may I invite from First Global, Mrs. Miriam McIntosh Robinson, along with Cornerstone, Mr. Weldon Madden. From Sagicor, Mrs. Chauvel Johnson Cunningham. First Caribbean, Mr. Owen Francis. And Citibank, Ms. Eva Lewis, the Director and Country Officer. Sure. 1 second. Sure. Yes. And I believe that means we've covered all our partners. Mr. Blake, you signed on behalf of the NCB group as well, and of course the Bankers Association. Jerome did that for him. And this is all our partners here signing to ensure that one of the positive effects of signing on to the NIDS to facilitate more efficient fulfillment of the Know Your Customer due diligence requirements, this certainly will provide the authentication and verification of the ID services for deposit-taking institutions in the future. A round of applause once again, ladies and gentlemen. And may I ask all our partners who have signed already, who are not here, this is when we'll take a group photo, because this is very momentous. And of course, just fall right in, yes. And Mr. Prime Minister, may I ask yourself and Mr. Blake to just come to the front and do I beg your pardon, yes, let's do it in front of the table as opposed to behind. In front of the table. And then yourself and Mr. Blake, if you could do the symbolic handshake with the sign, with the, I beg your pardon, document. All right. And so all of our partners, if you could fall in place for us. This is absolutely critical, and it shows Jamaica that you mean business, that you mean that the NIDS will be used, will become a reality, and it's also a vote of confidence in what will be done for the future. And so our photographers are making sure that we get it right. So may I ask for patience for those who are in the photograph. Wonderful. I see everyone looking ahead, and the photographers are very happy. This certainly a moment in history in Jamaica. The official signing of the Memorandum of Understanding with deposit-taking institutions for the National Identification System's pilot of identification, verification, and authentication services. Indeed. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. And so since you're all standing and since we all have to go back and do our regular duties, the Prime Minister has several engagements for the day. May I thank you all for being part of this very, very short and important ceremony on behalf of the Prime Minister, and certainly to get the NIDS going. May I thank you all for joining us online and those who are here, and wish you all a very good Friday. Have a good day, everyone, and see you sometime soon.